Holiday pay. It's something that affects almost every single person with a job here in the UK. But let's be honest, the rules can be seriously confusing. Have you ever looked at your payslip and wondered, am I actually getting paid the right amount? Well, in this guide, we're going to pull back the curtain and demystify UK holiday pay so you can feel confident you're getting every penny you're owed. Let's jump right in. So, let me ask you that question directly. Are you 100% certain you're being paid correctly when you take time off? It sounds like a simple question, right? But the answer can be surprisingly complex. The good news is, by the time we're done here, you'll know exactly how to figure it out for yourself. Okay, so to really understand your holiday pay, we've got to start at the beginning. It all boils down to one fundamental right, a right that is guaranteed by law for every single worker in the UK. Let's break down what that is. Here it is, the magic number you need to remember, 5.6. Under the working time regulations from way back in 1998, every worker in the UK is entitled to a minimum of 5.6 weeks of paid holiday each and every year. This number, it's the foundation that everything else is built on. So, what does 5.6 weeks actually look like in the real world? Well, for someone working a standard 5-day week, that's simple. It works out to 28 days of paid holiday. But, and this is crucial, this rate isn't just for full-timers. If you work part-time, your holiday is calculated on what's called a pro rata basis. So, if you work, say, 3 days a week, you're entitled to 16.8 days. It's all about making sure it's fair and proportional to the time you put in. All right, we've got the basic entitlement down. The next big question is, who actually gets this holiday pay? The law uses a very specific term, worker. And you know what? It's a much, much broader category than most people think. It's definitely not just for people in a typical 9-to-5 office job. Here's the official definition from the rulebook. A worker is anyone who has an employment contract or who personally performs work for someone else. Now, that second part is the real game changer because it throws the doors wide open to cover all sorts of working arrangements that go way beyond a traditional employee-employer relationship. And when you see who falls under this umbrella, you get the picture. Of course, it includes permanent employees, but it also covers agency workers, casual workers, people on 0-hour contracts, and yes, even many apprentices and workers in the gig economy. If you're doing a job on this list, you almost certainly have a right to paid holidays. Now, this is a critical point. Thanks to some really big landmark legal cases, you might have heard about the one involving Uber drivers, it's now firmly established that what matters is the reality of your working relationship, not just the label that's slapped on your contract. So even if a company calls you self-employed, if you're personally providing a service for them and you're not their client, you could very well be classed as a worker and be entitled to that holiday pay. Okay, let's talk about the pay part of holiday pay. This is where things can get a little complicated. And frankly, it's where a lot of employers have made mistakes over the years. It's not always as simple as just looking at your basic salary. You see, there's been a massive shift in how holiday pay is supposed to be calculated. The old way was pretty simple. It was often just based on your basic salary, and that was it. But now, the rules say it must be based on your normal remuneration. What does that mean? It means your holiday pay should actually reflect what you normally earn, which includes things like regular overtime and commission. The whole idea is that you shouldn't be financially worse off just for taking a well-deserved break. And this big shift to normal pay didn't just happen overnight. It was the result of several landmark court cases that completely changed the landscape. For instance, the Bears Scotland case made it clear that regular overtime has to be included. Then, Locke versus British Gas did the same for commission. These rulings fundamentally rewrote the rules for how holiday pay is calculated here in the UK. So, how do employers figure out what your normal pay is? Well, since April 2020, they have to use what's called a 52-week reference period. This means they have to look back at the last 52 weeks where you actually got paid to figure out your average weekly earnings. This gives a much more accurate and fair picture of your income than the old 12-week system it replaced. All right, we've covered the principles, we've looked at the history, now it's time to get practical and actually do the maths. Don't worry, even though the rules can seem complex, we can break the calculations down into some simple, easy-to-follow steps. Now, what if you work irregular shifts? It can feel a bit confusing. The best approach is to calculate your entitlement in hours instead of days. So, first you figure out your average weekly hours over that 52-week period. Then you just multiply that average by our magic number, 5.6. The final result is your total entitlement to paid holiday, in hours, for the whole year. Let's walk through a quick example to see this in action.
Imagine a worker whose basic weekly pay is £400. But as you can see from this chart, they also regularly earn overtime and commission. To calculate their holiday pay correctly, we absolutely have to include those extra earnings. As this table shows really clearly, once we factor in that overtime and commission, this worker's average weekly earnings are actually £575, not just their basic $400 pay. I mean, that is a huge difference, right? And it means their holiday pay must be based on that higher, much fairer amount. Okay, we're in the home stretch. In our final section, we're going to cover some of the most common mistakes and pitfalls to watch out for, and we'll also quickly cover what happens to your holiday pay when you leave a job. Here are 3 really common mistakes you should keep an eye out for. First, basing holiday pay only on basic salary. Second, using that outdated 12-week average instead of the proper 52-week one. And third, just getting the pro rata maths wrong for part-time workers. Now you know what to look for. You can check your own payslip for these potential issues. And if you're leaving your job for a new opportunity, you are entitled to be paid out for any holiday time you've earned but haven't actually used. The process is pretty straightforward. First, you work out exactly how much holiday you've accrued up to your final day. Then you subtract any holiday you've already taken that year. Whatever's left over is what your employer owes you in your final paycheck. So, to wrap this all up, just remember, your holiday pay isn't a bonus or a perk. It's a key part of your total earnings. It's money you have earned. We really hope this guide has given you the tools and the confidence to look at your own payslip and ask the question, does it tell the full story? Thanks for tuning in.